Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a truly radical paradigm shift. We're unpacking Neville Goddard's fascinating 1954 text, Awakened Imagination. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this is just going to be some abstract, head-in-the-clouds philosophy, well, think again. What we're actually looking at today is a highly practical, step-by-step toolkit for reshaping your own reality. We're going to take these concepts that might sound a little mystical at first and bring them right down to earth.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. Now, coming from Albert Einstein, a man whose entire legacy is literally built on scientific, concrete knowledge, that statement carries some massive emotional weight. We really want to set a tone of profound psychological intensity today. We're completely stripping away the esoteric language that usually gets attached to these ideas because we want to find the concrete, actionable power hidden right underneath. According to this framework, imagination isn't just daydreaming. It is the very foundation of existence.
Okay, let's dive into our structured roadmap. We're going to build a step-by-step understanding of this mind-bending theory, covering the gateway to reality, thinking from the end, the art of revision, mastering your inner speech, and finally, the concept that creation is already finished. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the gateway to reality, redefining the metaphors. Before we can actually use these tools, we have to grasp the first massive leap in Goddard's theory, and it starts by completely reframing texts that humanity has studied for thousands of years. He argues that the central figure of the Gospels is actually just a metaphor for human imagination. He states that God, or Christ, isn't a historical figure you go seeking out in the external world. Instead, it's the human imagination itself, the eternal creative body of man. We really need to de-jargon this religious allegory. Goddard is talking about intense internal psychological concepts here. The creator isn't somewhere out there. The creator is your very own capacity to imagine. Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is how it completely reframes our idea of control. If imagination is the creator, what exactly is sin? Well, Goddard defines it simply as missing your mark in life or falling short of an ideal. It's not about some ultimate moral failing. It's just about a lack of focus. And the solution? Forgiveness. But in this context, forgiveness means identifying yourself with your ideal aim. It entirely reframes our lack of control as the problem and focus-directed imagination as the solution.
Moving right along to Section 2, thinking from the end, the core technique.
So now that we've established imagination as the creative force, how do we actually use this inner gateway to change our external circumstances? The absolutely crucial point is understanding the massive difference between wanting something and mentally occupying the state of already having it. Thinking of the end means you're just an onlooker. You're viewing a goal from a distance, which leaves it as a mere possibility. But thinking from the end, that means you mentally partake in the fulfilled desire right now. You view the world from that state of consciousness, making it an overpowering reality in your mind way before it ever happens in the physical world.
Let's ground this radical theory with a compelling narrative anchor straight from the source text. Picture this. It's the fall of 1933. Goddard is completely broke in New York City, but he desperately wants to spend the winter with his family in Barbados. His mentor tells him to use this exact technique. So every single night, he slept in his imagination as if he were already in Barbados. Fast forward 1 month later, entirely out of the blue, he receives a letter from his brother containing a steamship ticket. 2 days later, he's sailing to Barbados.
His mentor's exact instruction was this: you must imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The logic here is just astounding. By sleeping in his father's house in his imagination, he literally fused his consciousness with that state. By occupying the feeling of the wish already being fulfilled, he created this purposive inner movement. And that inner movement actually compelled the outer world to match it, meaning he got to experience it in the flesh without spending a single dime of his own money.
Let's see how this builds in Section 3, the art of revision, the daily correction.
Thinking from the end is incredibly powerful for those big life goals. But what about our everyday frustrations? Goddard calls his solution to this the pruning shears of revision. It's a nightly exercise. Before you fall asleep, you review the day's events. When you hit a disappointing or frustrating scene, you don't just dwell on it. No, you mentally rewrite it to conform to the ideal way you wish it had happened. Then, you experience that revised scene in your imagination over and over until it feels real. Honestly, I challenge you to test this out tonight on a frustration you dealt with today. Just rewrite it and see how it shifts your entire state of mind. To really show how the art of revision and thinking from the end can solve seemingly impossible real-world problems, let's look at a second narrative anchor. A blind girl living in San Francisco was facing a massive transportation issue. Because of rerouted buses, her simple 15-minute commute suddenly turned into an exhausting 2-hour and 15-minute ordeal that required multiple transfers. I mean, we've all been trapped in transit nightmares, right? But she decided to put this imaginative theory to the test to find a solution.
Sitting right there in her living room, she said, "I will sit here and imagine that I am being driven." Because she was blind, she had to focus intensely on her other senses. She felt the steady rhythm of the motor vibrating beneath her. She smelled the distinct heavy odor of gasoline. She even reached out and touched the coarse fabric of the driver's sleeve, sensing it was a man. At the end of the imaginary ride, she would turn and say, "Thank you very much, sir," and hear the car door snap shut. She fired up her imagination with incredible, deliberate sensory vividness.
And what happened next brilliantly illustrates the power of this practice. She took these intense imaginary rides for just 2 successive days. A few hours after that second ride, a complex chain of events unfolded. A friend of hers happened to tell a story to a total stranger at a bar. That stranger, along with another man, instantly volunteered to drive this blind girl to and from work every single day. Just like that, her commute was reduced back to 15 minutes. It perfectly proves Goddard's point. Inner, purposive movement always creates a corresponding outer movement.
Pivoting now to Section 4, Mastering Your Inner Speech, the Sowing of Seeds.
We've talked a lot about what to do right before falling asleep, but what about the constant mental conversations we have with ourselves all day long? Ask yourself right now, are you spending or investing your thoughts? I want you to really think about this because it makes the whole philosophy feel urgent and immediately applicable to wherever your head is at today. Your inner speech is constantly running, and every single thought is a transaction. You are either throwing away your mental currency or you're planting seeds for your future reality. Let's break that down a bit more. Spending thoughts means you're wasting your mental energy on feeling misunderstood, neglected, suspicious, or afraid. You're just squandering it. Investing thoughts, on the other hand, means deliberately assuming the feeling of being exactly what you want to be. Goddard warns us that the present moment never just recedes into the past. It actually advances into the future as either spent waste or a profitable investment. Your inner talking is the actual cause of your future action. So to fix this, you have to replace that mechanical, negative chatter with precise inner speech that comes from the premises of your fulfilled desire. Here are some concrete examples straight from the source text. I have a large, steady, dependable income. I am happily married. I am contributing to the good of the world. The goal is to construct a sentence that implies your aim is already fulfilled, and you repeat it inwardly until you are genuinely affected by it. Over time, your inner speech will outpicture itself as solidified sound in your actual circumstances. And finally, Section 5, Creation is already finished. The infinite abyss. This brings us to the final, most profound paradigm shift of all. If our imagination shapes reality, we have to understand how time and reality actually function under this framework. Goddard connects the ancient text of Ecclesiastes, "There is nothing to come that has not been and is," to the poet William Blake's concept of the sculptures of Los's halls. The big idea here? Creation is already finished. Every possible human situation, every single drama, triumph, and failure already exist right now as a mere possibility. They are literally just waiting for a human imagination to enter them and activate them. Goddard tested this concept with a mind-bending, genuinely surreal experience. While meditating in New York, his consciousness somehow slipped into a remote country inn. He intuitively realized that if he stopped the activity of his own mind, outer time would completely freeze. He tightened his attention to a crystal clear focus, and suddenly, the waitress stopped mid-step. The falling leaves, frozen midair. The diners stopped lifting their food. The moment he relaxed his attention, everything moved onward again. He used this incredible experience to prove that outer reality is entirely dependent on the continuous mental activity of the observer. To summarize this core takeaway, it helps to imagine reality as a giant house. The states of consciousness, like wealth, poverty, health, or sickness, are fixed rooms in that house. You, the imaginative self, are the moving occupant. When you consent to a certain belief, you walk into that specific room, and your presence activates the dramas and plots of that space. It is incredibly empowering when you think about it. Everything you could ever desire is already present, just waiting for you to simply walk into that room by changing your beliefs and your inner speech. Which brings us to our final question for this explainer. If creation is already finished and every possible reality already exists, which state are you choosing to fuse your imagination with right now? You are the occupant of the house. You have the pruning shears of revision. You control the inner speech. The reality you experience tomorrow is entirely dependent on the room you choose to mentally occupy today. Choose wisely, invest your thoughts, and start thinking from the end.